Good evening, and thank you for joining me again for our monthly series on various topics that are going to affect every individual personally with their financial aspect of their life. Uh, I'm Stan Lozinski. I'm a certified financial planner and registered fiduciary. And today's topic is going to be financial planning basics. Uh, Everything that we're going to talk about today is going to be related to the idea of how each of the various facets of a financial plan can impact your life. So we're going to get started here and realize there isn't a one size fits all aspect to a financial plan. It's customized to every individual. Every person is different. So what this session is really designed to do is make you think about your own personal circumstance and how best to approach a plan for your needs. Now, we're going to cover a lot of ground today. Probably the most important aspect of setting up a financial plan is setting specific goals. We work on goals constantly with clients, just again to understand what their hot points are, and again what their destination is. Without a specific goal in mind, you're sort of shooting in the dark. So very important topic that we're going to be addressing today. Also budgeting. Part of every plan includes a budget, and we're going to talk about the various facets of a budget. Emergency funds to make sure that you have assets available for any contingencies in life. Insurance, again, a better understanding of risk management and how insurance plays a part in all of that. Utilizing credit. This is something that most people struggle with, how best to utilize and deploy credit, whether it's for buying a home, credit cards, and things along those lines. And then underlying all of this is investing, again, saving for a specific goal, things along those lines, and the various types of investments that are out there. And again, the risks that are associated with each of these various areas. Tax planning, probably the secondarily most important aspect of this, because income is always taxed, but there are certain types of investments that will provide tax-free distributions, things along those lines, and we'll be touching on that. Savings for college. If you have a family and children and you're looking to provide for a college education for them, again, there's some topics that we're going to address again with that as part of a financial plan. Retirement planning, again, having that end goal in mind of what retirement may look like for you individually. And then also estate planning. Estate planning really wraps a bow around all of this, because all of that hard work and legacy that you've created for your family, you want that to carry on into the next generation, and also make sure that all of your personal affairs are in order. So estate planning is a critical component that flows right through on the financial plan. So let's start first with just simply about goal setting. Now, goals can be of various sorts. You could have a goal to pay down a credit card, buy a new car, buy a home, save enough money for that, again, pay for a college education, or simply look to the long-term future planning for retirement. So all of these pieces are part of a big puzzle that we're going to put together here for you today. Now, let's talk about goal setting. Goals are so important to really address, but how smart are your goals? And SMART is really an acronym for a goal to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Now, let's talk about what a specific goal would be. And essentially, I want to retire at age 65, and I want to have 75% of my current income available to me in retirement. So that is a very specific goal. If someone turned around and said, yeah, I think I'm going to retire maybe in my 60s or 70s, that's not a specific goal. So again, having an understanding of the time that you're looking at, is the goal measurable? We identified an age when I wanted to retire in that example, and also that I wanted to have 75% of my current income. So it's definitely measurable. Is it attainable though? Now, this is important when we start looking at budgeting and things like that. Are you maybe overreaching on your goal or making assumptions on that goal that are not realistic? So these are things that we'll start to address also in part of the planning process. Are the goals relevant? I want to save $25,000 for a down payment on a home for me and my family. That is a relevant goal because it's affecting me personally. And is it timely? Do you have a specific timeline in mind? Again, understanding the time factor in specific goal planning. Some may be short-term goals, which require more immediate attention, but others are longer term, like a retirement plan, things along those lines. The key with any goal, though, is making sure that you write them down and prioritize them. I personally do this right above my desk here where I'm working and talking to you from tonight. I have over my desk a simple sign that has two numbers on it, 62 and 100%. I want to be 100% debt free at age 62. So I made that a specific goal for myself, and it is specific, measurable, definitely attainable. I'm on track for it. And it's relevant, it's personal. I want to make sure my mortgages are all paid off by 62. And it's timely. I know the timelines involved with this particular goal. I encourage you to think along those lines when you write down your goals, and then again, having them in front of you at various times. I know people that keep them in their wallet, specifically that, hey, this is where I want to be in 10 years, and they can look at it periodically, or on their phone, or again, maybe around your home or office, you have these little reminders of the goals that you're setting. Now, budgeting. This is sometimes a very negative connotation for a lot of people. Really, when you just think about it, understanding the sources of income that are available to you that are coming into your household, and then understanding what you're spending your money on is so critical. You don't obviously want to be spending more than you make. So again, understanding your cash flow needs and so on is extremely important. In some of my previous video blogs that I have posted, I used to talk about a specific idea for budgeting around the concept of 50% of your income should go towards fixed expenses like your mortgage payment or rent, car payments, food, clothing, some of the basic necessities of life. The next 30% could go for, the upgrades, the luxury upgrades that you're thinking about, whether it's a vacation, stepping up a little bit more in a car, redoing certain rooms of your home. Again, these are the not the necessities, but luxuries or that you want to afford yourself. The remaining 20% should be focused in more of a long-term or short-term savings goal, and it could be a combination of them. But again, understanding these categories and budgeting those items is extremely important. Now, what goes into the income portion here? Obviously, if you're working, you have a paycheck every week, you're earning wages. If you are renting properties and you're receiving rental income from them, that could be another source. Government benefits like Social Security, interest income, whether it be maybe from the bank, bonds, dividends from stocks, or even investment income, where you're generating income from some investment strategy. So all of that tallies together to form your income number. And then next, we take out the expenses. And this is important to put this all down on paper, just like we did with the goals. But here we itemize everything that you're spending your money on. So once we've identified all the income sources that are coming into your household, now we break down your expenses. And again, you can divide the expenses between the two categories, the fixed expenses, those necessities that you have to have, and those discretionary items, the dinners out, the vacation, things like that. So once you boil down these expenses, when it comes out to any sort of amount that it might equal, either it's going to have a surplus or a deficit, or you might be neutral, spending exactly the amount that you're receiving as income in addition against all the expenses that you're realizing. The idea is we want you to have a surplus of income. So it's very important to understand what your fixed expenses and discretionary expenses are. Some of the most successful people that I've ever known in my life, and I've been in business for well over 30 years now, were people that lived below their means. And I say this wholeheartedly because It is what helped me throughout my life in understanding the balance between income and what you're spending your money on. So it's extremely important that you keep this in mind. And as you have these specific goals for, again, either savings and so on within your financial plan, understanding just the basic source of your income and what you're spending your money on is the first major step that you can take. Now, an emergency fund, this is hopefully where some of that surplus income that you have will be utilized for. And basically, an emergency fund is an easily accessible source of money that can be part of your financial plan. I generally recommend most people keep 3 to 6 months of their regular monthly expenses. So again, going back to that budgeting page, understand what you're spending your money on and what the obligations to your household are monthly, quarterly, and annually. So breaking down those monthly expenses is extremely important, especially when we want to have some additional savings available for an emergency fund. And this should be money that, again, can be utilized for contingencies. The boiler breaks, the car breaks down, I need a new roof on the house, whatever it may be. We don't want to be always tapping credit for these types of expenses. So having a pool of cash available for these types of contingencies is extremely important. And also where you keep that money is also important. You want to have it in a liquid area. Typically, we recommend like a bank money market account, something like that, that's linked up to your regular checking, that you can move money back and forth very easily. And, just again, keeping that money accessible. In the money market, interest rates are still relatively low out in the world. So you're not going to be making a lot of money, but the money is safe and accessible. And I think that's the overriding mantra for an emergency fund. It has to be safe and accessible. And again, 3 to 6 months of your regular expenses is typically the range that we like to see people maintaining in that type of an account. Now, risk management. We were talking about insurance earlier briefly, and there's so many different parts of the insurance world that affect an individual's life. And you really have to take a step back and understand exactly what we're doing here with insurance. We are transferring some sort of risk to a third party, an insurance company, when you buy insurance. Now, if you had to self-insure for all the various things that will affect your life at some point, whether it be health issues, property issues, and so on, liabilities, it would cost you probably a lot of money if you didn't have the proper insurance in place. So the most important with anything is health insurance. The number one cause for bankruptcies in the United States is because of health insurance medical expenses. Now that's dropped down a little bit since the Affordable Care Act came into being back in 2014, and people had more access to health insurance programs. But the underlying reason is to, again, when someone thinks they're healthy and unfortunately they have an accident or something like that, you got to have insurance in place. Unforeseen illness or injuries are probably the biggest things that cause people to have issues financially if they don't have the proper coverage. Next item, if anyone owns a car, you know that by law, we all have to maintain a certain amount of auto insurance, primarily for liability purposes. But obviously, also, you want to insure your vehicle for its value, assuming it has some residual value. So that combined with a typical homeowner's policy and things like that, very important. We'll talk briefly about also excess coverage with regards to umbrella policies and things like that in a second. But after auto insurance, probably life insurance, if you have a family and potentially have any debts for a home mortgage or other expenses that you want to make sure that are addressed should something happen to you, and provide, again, coverage for those items, or leaving behind an income source for your family, very important. And we can talk about all the various types of coverages. There's term, whole life, universal life, variable life. Again, there are different types of insurance to address those personal needs, and we can sit here for hours talking about them all, but I'm going to keep going here. Property insurance, again, insuring your assets for their value, whether it be your home, car, artwork, personal effects, whatever it may be. Having property insurance protection is very important. Should they ever become damaged or stolen, again, you're insured. The next area would be the liability protection. And again, this is where I would say all auto and homeowner type policies have a liability component. I do encourage everyone to talk to your insurance advisor to ask them if you can get an umbrella policy for those coverages. Having this excess liability protection, usually it's an extra $1 million is a typical policy. It only costs maybe $200, $300, $400, but it gives you that extra peace of mind that should, God forbid, something happen and a liability be created by some of your actions or on your properties, realize having that extra protection is so important. We're in a very litigious world. Lawsuits get thrown around very readily. So having that extra protection will give you, I think, that extra peace of mind that you won't have to worry too much about things. Now, disability insurance is probably the most important aspect of someone's protection that I would recommend, particularly if you're younger and getting older towards your career. Realize when you are younger, your most important asset is your ability to work. If you don't have that ability to work, that income is taken away from you. Most companies do provide very basic DBL coverage, which provides in New York up to $170 a week. Not much. And then there's also workers' comp. But again, those are very limited coverages specific to either work-related injury or a non-work related, as is the case with DBL. So having proper disability insurance, if you are a young professional or a business person and working out there, and realize that you're 16 times more likely to become disabled than to pass away, the importance of having a good disability package is extreme. And I recommend that you check at your place of business if you have options available to you. If not, maybe there's additional coverage we can discuss for you in the future. Long-term care insurance is another form of disability insurance, but obviously this is addressing when we're in our later years going into retirement. Long-term care basically focuses on ensuring you and your ability to perform certain tasks. They call them actual daily living standards. And they're items like clothing yourself, transferring, bathing, and so on, and feeding and whatnot. There's 6 main items, and then the last category would also be cognitive impairments. We're all living longer. And some of the challenges, if anyone has ever dealt with a parent or another loved one that has a situation where they may need skilled care or nursing care, whether in a home setting or in a nursing facility, you understand what the costs are for this type of coverage, for that type of care. Realize Medicare only covers a limited amount for rehabilitation and nursing home care. After you're done with that particular coverage, and it's generally for only 20 days in a facility, and then there's a copay up to the next 100th day, and then after that, you're paying out of pocket. Most long-term care situations go on for an average of 3 years. So depending on what potential illness, injury, or degenerative factor you're dealing with, the need is real. The costs for this in the tri-state area can average around $10,000 to $12,000 per month. So considering long-term care coverage at a younger age is very valuable and something everyone should take a look at to make sure that they are protecting their assets really in the future. If you don't have the coverage, you will be paying 100% of the cost out of your pocket unless you don't have assets and you qualify for Medicaid type coverage, which is not the most desirable when it comes to nursing home care and so on. Now, talking a little bit now about using credit. Ben Franklin's famous quote here is, remember that credit is money. A lot of people don't understand that and think of credit as something that's very separate from their regular finances. Realize credit is money, and it is basically someone loaning you money to buy certain goods or services that you may need. Now, The 3 C's of credit are basically, do you have the capacity to pay back the money? Do you have the character to and the will to pay back the money? And lastly, do you have the collateral? Meaning, do you have income or other assets that can guarantee the repayment of that money that's being loaned to you? And, again, how do creditors determine your credit worthiness? Well, it goes basically on your credit application. They want to see what assets you have, what income you have, and then they're going to look at your credit score. Now, your credit score is going to basically be a historical number of how good you handled credit in the past. Were your payments on time? Did you pay it off early? Things along those lines affect your credit score. And everybody should have a good understanding of what their credit score is. And at all times, particularly if you are thinking about making a major purchase. And that's probably the biggest item here that caps all of this off, because understanding how credit works for you is going to be probably the determining factor in your successful planning in the future. Qualifying for a mortgage, qualifying for a student loan if that is necessary. Things along those lines are where this all comes into play. So having a good credit score is extremely important. Now, when that money is loaned to you, it is now a form of debt. So whether it is a mortgage that you just took out when you bought your first home, or a credit card that you're using to cover certain living expenses when you're dining out and things along those lines. Again, using credit creates debt. And there's basically a couple of different types of debt, as I was just chatting about. First would be a secured debt. That would be debt that is backed up by a specific asset. The most common is the mortgage on your home. Your home is the asset that is securing that debt. Unsecured debt would be like a credit card. Now, realize the difference between secured debt and unsecured debt is the interest rates that are potentially charged here. A secured debt like a mortgage, if you look at mortgage rates, you're looking at a 30-year mortgage. It's because it's secure. They have an asset that backs up the debt. You're paying an interest rate of about 4% nowadays, give or take. Unsecured debt, like a credit card, you could be paying anywhere from 15 to 20 some odd percent for the interest on that unsecured debt. So understand the types of debt that you're taking on. And again, the important considerations, as always, is the amount of credit or debt that you're extended, what the terms of the debt are. Are they payable monthly? Is it an open-ended interest rate calculation, or is it of a fixed term, fixed rate? And these types of items are extremely important to understand. Don't just sign up for that credit card offer if it comes in the mail. Things along those lines. Understand and compare. There's plenty of tools online that you can pull up that will help you understand exactly the various types of credit cards that would work best for your personal needs. Maybe you want a credit card that utilizes air miles, things along those lines. Look it up. They're out there. But understanding what the terms are if you are going to be carrying a balance is extremely important, and what interest rate you're going to be paying. I typically recommend to all of my clients, unsecured debt like a credit card should be paid off monthly. I don't like people carrying debt because it can lead to other issues, and excessive spending is probably one of the biggest concerns. Now, talking about investing. There's 2 different areas of investing that are of consideration here. One is called speculating. The other is general savings. Now, what's the difference between the 2 of these, and what's the big factors with all of this? Realize investing is a planned series of contributions into a various savings with a goal of accumulating the funds that you need. But understanding what speculation is and general savings are 2 very different things. And, to understand them in general, a savings plan is long-term. We're looking at like a retirement account, a 401k, where you're going to be putting in money every paycheck, or an IRA where you're making an annual contribution with the idea of retiring in 10, 15, 20 years. We generally look at this as a core savings account. And generally, that should be the focus of your overall portfolio. Now, if you're thinking about buying a specific stock or a cryptocurrency or something like that, that is going to be more speculating. And, it may be something that you like a particular industry. Maybe you just want to get into a certain type of growth stock or something like that. Whatever it is, if it's something that is going to be more of a short-term investment that you're looking for a large gain, that is speculating. And typically we like to limit clients to not having more than 5, at most 10% of their portfolio in speculative areas. The rest of their assets should be either in a liquid fund like the emergency fund, like we talked about earlier, or general long-term savings, which is in a portfolio that's very diversified and provides a steady growth story that will not blow up on you at various points, as would potentially a speculative investment. Now, understanding the risk-reward trade-off, particularly when we were just talking about investments and so on, is extremely important. I could have 2 individuals, 2 40-year-olds, 2 50-year-olds, 2 60-year-olds. Within each of those categories, one could be extremely conservative, one could be extremely aggressive, could be moderate, whatever it is. No 2 people are alike. And everyone has their own personal risk tolerance. It's not just a matter of saying, well, I have 20 years to retirement or 10 or 15, so I can be more aggressive now. Realize, markets will go through up and down cycles. We happen to be heading into a little bit of a trough period right now with things that are going on in the world. So markets have retracted a little bit. But understanding, if you have a specific goal in mind and it is long-term, these cycles tend to be short-lived and the markets do recover. But there's never that guarantee. So again, understanding personally what would affect you if you got your account statement at the end of the first quarter of 2022 and you saw that account statement was down 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, understanding that if you had a very conservative risk tolerance, that may not be a good situation for you and may keep you up at night. But if you have a long-term perspective and you are invested in the appropriate risk tolerance portfolios that reflect your particular goals and objectives, you won't have a problem with that and understand that the market is going through its cycle and you're not close to that, retirement age per se, and you can tolerate this risk factor. But again, understanding what that individual's risk factors are extremely important. And again, how does your investment plan deal with potential losses? Do you understand the nature of them, or is there some underlying issue within your plan that may be offsetting to you? Again, sitting down and understanding exactly what is in your portfolio is extremely important. And an investment portfolio can be broken down into 3 basic categories. We can talk about growth, particular type investments. This is where we're looking for an investment to grow and increase in market value. We could be talking about an income type investment. This is paying interest or dividends, like a particular stock that's a high dividend payer or a bond that's paying interest and so on. And then lastly, we could look at stability or the protection of the original investment. So when you put all 3 of these together, understand that by stressing one over the other and focusing in different areas will de-emphasize the portfolio. So understanding that if you're looking for stability, you're likely not going to have a high growth story in that stable portion of your portfolio. But if you do have some growth stocks in the portfolio as part of the diversification, then you know that that piece may be more volatile at times versus others, versus the income portion of the portfolio, which may be your dividend payers or bond portion of the portfolio. The stability portion could be your emergency fund, and that's in the bank and earning a small amount of interest, but it's very stable and protected. So again, understanding how all of these areas interact with each other is extremely important when you start thinking about an investment plan. And again, setting those goals and objectives, understanding those overriding risk factors that go along with each types of categories. Now, income tax considerations are, as I mentioned earlier on, are very important. Many of us have the ability to utilize pre-tax dollars from our payroll and so on, which is very helpful, particularly either when you're looking to contribute money towards a retirement plan or possibly health savings accounts, things along those lines. You know, if you're spending money out of, let's say, a health savings account, you know, some of the examples that you could be looking at, again, pre-tax money being utilized for health or dependent care costs, transportation costs, or again, contributing to a retirement plan. Now, the benefit of the pre-tax dollars is the fact that as that money is invested or held in that account, the growth is tax deferred. So if you're earning interest or the money is growing, you're not paying taxes on it all along that glide path. So no taxes are withdrawn from those accounts until potentially in the future. Now, in certain cases, distributions from these types of accounts are tax-free. A simple example would be like a 529 college savings account. You put money into an account with the goal for saving for a child's education at college age. And when you take the money out to pay for a qualified education, that money is taken out tax-free. So again, some nice factors in considering that. Again, college retirement savings accounts. Again, if you have a Roth factor, a Roth type IRA portfolio, Roth IRAs have a tax-free withdrawal feature. So there's some positives there. But you know, there is some nuances about Roths that an individual should understand, particularly if while they're working, they're typically in a higher tax bracket. So when someone is thinking about savings in a Roth account, thinking long-term, when they're in retirement, are they going to be in a higher tax bracket or a lower tax bracket? So understanding those differences is important. Most of the time, a Roth account does make sense if you think you're going to be in the same or higher tax bracket. So, you know, keep in mind that, you know, tax brackets do change every 4 years. It seems the government wants to revise everyone's tax rates, but just keep in mind that, you know, Roth versus a traditional retirement account are important considerations when it comes to how it will be taxed when you do retire. And lastly, in some cases, if you're dealing with an early retirement below the age of 59 and a half, which is the government's magic age of when someone can retire and pull money out of a 401k per se, or a regular IRA without paying a penalty, realize the penalty on these types of distributions are typically, you know, 10% of the asset. So I would just recommend that you keep that in mind, or as they say here, also non-qualified distributions. So if you think about a 529 college savings account, if you pulled money out of that and didn't use it for college spending, that becomes a problem. You then will pay taxes and also a 10% IRS penalty. So understanding these nuances is extremely important. Now, let's talk just briefly about the benefits of tax deferred growth. This is just a very simple example where an individual in year one invested $10,000. It is earning a 6% annual growth rate, and we're going to apply a 24% tax rate to the taxable investment, and the taxes are going to be deducted directly from the account. So as you'll see in this example, starting in year 0 and then tracing this out to 30 years, in the tax deferred account, that money would have grown and compounded in interest without paying taxes on those dollars, would have grown to $57,435. Comparing that to a taxable account where it had the 24% tax rate applied to the growth every year, that account is only $38,104. So we're looking here at about a $19,000 differential after 30 years. It's quite substantial. Think about if you had an extra $30,000 or $20,000 in your retirement account just by eliminating, you know, this tax portion of the plan. Now, savings for college. College savings plans come in a couple of different flavors. You generally have The 529 type plans or the prepaid tuition programs, those have been very popular. And then you also have a lot of people utilize in the past what we call custodial accounts. We're going to touch on the 529 accounts here because the tax benefits that are related to this. Realize 529 plans have to be used specifically for a qualified higher education or trade school. It has to be accredited. There's also some opportunity, as you'll read here, that a portion of the 529 savings can also now be used for private education from K through 12 for tuition. So understanding that, also you can do student loan repayments if a child has student loans, things along those lines. Realize money deposited in a 529 account generally grows tax-free as long as it's utilized for those college type expenses. Prepaid tuition plans are more state specific. We don't see a lot of those out there. There was some about 20 years ago that were around, but they're pretty limited today. Basically, within the state that you live, you could pay a specific amount of money into the state coffers, and they would guarantee you a college education at one of the state schools. Again, not so popular, again, because it tends to be a little bit more restrictive. 529 plans can be utilized for any college. And just going back to my initial comment on utilizing a custodial type account, these would be the UGMA or UTMA type accounts. Those accounts can be utilized for college or any other expense as long as it's utilized for the child's benefit. So those are also a very popular item. Again, if you want maximum flexibility, that you don't want to save specifically for college, maybe you just want to have that as a general goal in the background, but maybe the child may want to just go into the armed forces or start a family, go to work and start a family. You can pay for a wedding out of that account. You can provide it to a down payment for a home or a car. So again, custodial accounts give you much more flexibility, but the tax benefits are not as good as the 529 plan. Typically, a custodial account will have an exemption of a certain portion of the earnings each year. But once you exceed that earnings portion, the remainder of that rolls back to the account owner, typically the custodian or the parent, and they would be picking up that additional income on their taxes. So if you have at all a preference, a 529 plan can make the most sense if you have a specific goal of either a college education or a certified apprenticeship or trade school for that child. Now, again, just touching on, again, tax-free or potentially free earnings, tax-deferred growth. Again, utilizing these withdrawals for qualified education expense. And again, understanding the various fees and expenses attached to each of these plans is also important. Now, let's talk a little bit about retirement. Basic acronym. With time, you will have the most successful retirement because time is on your side with any of these types of plans. Realize retirement typically is a long-term goal. So we're looking to fund an account today with a small amount of money and hope that that money will grow and compound into a larger amount in the future. When we're talking retirement, we could be talking 20, 30, 40 years into the future, depending on when you start your career. Looking at this example, again, talking about the benefits of starting earlier in life with a retirement savings plan are extremely important. So the blue line here basically depicts an individual that starts in their early 20s, depositing $3,000 a year, and they're earning a 6% growth rate. Now, assuming there's no taxes here, this is a retirement account, so everything is tax deferred. So at age 65, that 20-year-old, their money is going to grow to $679,000. Now, if a person didn't start that same savings plan until age 35, the money only grows to $254,000. So that extra 15 years there provides a significant amount of extra growth in that money. Now, if you look at the next one here, if someone started at age 45, you only accumulate $120,000. So really, when you think about it, the earlier you can start, even as small as I tell some people, just start with $10 a week. That's $500 a year, $520. Drips make puddles. Small amounts of monies will grow over time. And again, the earlier you start, the better you will be over the long term. Now let's talk about some basic considerations. What kind of retirement do you want? All of these various bullet points address the idea of, hey, I want financial independence. I want freedom to travel, pursue hobbies, the ability to live where I want, whether it's at my current home, vacation home, and so on, or provide financially for your children and grandchildren. Whatever that goal potentially is, and it could be multiple goals. The idea is think about the importance of each of these, and then we prioritize them. And then we talk about when that retirement date ultimately will be. Now, I don't know a lot of people that say, I just want to work forever. A lot of people say, if I had the opportunity, I'd retire earlier. And some people have taken advantage of that over the last couple of years. We're seeing that pace of early retirement happening quite often after the COVID pandemics and so on. People basically said, I like being home. I'm going to start to, if I have the opportunity, I will retire. And some of them did do that. Realize, though, is when you retire early, you tend to have less time on your side to accumulate the funds that you need. So it's important to understand, again, going back to our budget, what income sources you'll have when you're ready to retire and what expenses you will be having at retirement. A lot of people say that their expenses didn't go down when they retired because they traveled more, they helped out children, things like that. Maybe they, pursued other hobbies, whatever it may be. Just have an understanding of what those expenses and obligations that you want to have when you're in retirement. And again, the time needed to accumulate those funds to make all that happen. Another consideration is Social Security will not be available till age 62. And then if we talk about your medical insurance needs, realize Medicare is not available to anybody until age 65 unless you're disabled. So the idea of maintaining medical insurance and medical insurance in retirement is probably one of the biggest factors that we have to consider, as we were talking earlier about the health insurance needs, disability, or long-term care type needs overall. So understanding what those needs might be, an average expense that some people were discussing, that in retirement, the average husband and wife will realize probably about $250,000 in medical expenses out of pocket over the course of their retirement over like a 20 or 25-year period. That's average. Whether it's because of, illness or injury that occur. Remember, I talked about earlier, long-term care. What does that look like? Again, those expenses, an average in the tri-state area of $10,000 to $12,000 per month for that kind of care. So again, healthcare is an extremely important component to think about when someone is ready to retire, and having the proper insurance in place is extremely important. And again, average life expectancies are likely to increase over in the future. So again, we're all living longer. So again, we have to make those retirement dollars last longer. And, one of the biggest aspects that people have concern about is Social Security. If you read your Social Security statement, and I encourage everybody to log on to Social Security if you don't get the paper copies anymore, and pull up your statement on their system. The website is ssa.gov. And right below the projections that they provide at the various ages for retirement, there's a paragraph there that's basically saying, based on the current money that Social Security is collecting, by the year approximately 2030 to 2033, again, it's a little bit of a moving target, but around, let's say 2033, they anticipate that they will only be collecting approximately 75% of what they need to be paying out to beneficiaries that are collecting Social Security. So technically around that year, the system becomes insolvent. Now, what has the government done in the past in these situations? They will adjust the Social Security benefits. They'll delay maximum benefits on certain generations, or they may look to tweak the inflation adjustments, the cost of living adjustments, and so on, or jigger the calculation a little bit further. Or, again, thinking about it from the perspective of just a continuous IOU that they keep funding the system with debt financing on the government. Again, it's a concern. A lot of people start Social Security earlier because of this. They feel that I might as well collect it now and get whatever I can get out of the system versus waiting until 65 or 66 or even 70 years old, when you can see that they pay out a higher monthly income benefit. So just understanding the Social Security benefits and how they will impact your retirement goals and income are going to be extremely important. And again, having that income in addition to Social Security lasting more than potentially 25 years is extremely critical. Now, tax advantage savings vehicles. And again, tax advantage deferred growth helps your money grow. I always recommend clients take advantage of any 401k or employer-sponsored plans that are made available to them. We do a lot of work in that retirement 401k space, and we're constantly acting as like a cheerleader for that employer, explaining the benefits, communicating with the employees, and really trying to encourage people to think about what their savings goals would have to be today to save for that retirement that they're thinking and dreaming about in the future. So take advantage of those plans, particularly if they do provide an employer match to your contributions. And again, if you're not eligible for a 401k through your employer, contribute annually just to a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. The traditional IRA typically will give you a tax deduction off of your income, or a Roth IRA will be post-tax money, but will grow tax-free for retirement. So again, explore each of these options and pick the one that's going to make the most sense for you. The 401k will let you put away more money than an IRA. So it's extremely important to think about what your savings goals are and what you need to put away today to fund for that future that you want. And lastly, again, just be cognizant of any early withdrawal issues. When you put money away into a retirement type plan, I really like people to think about it as set it and forget it, in that this is the last place you need to be accessing funds before you're ready to retire. We typically get calls, people want to take a loan or something like that from their account, which is fine. A loan typically on a 401k, you repay back within 5 years. But if I was under 59 and a half and I just said, hey, I need to take a distribution, I can do a hardship withdrawal because I'm being evicted from my home, I have extreme medical expenses, things like that. When you pull money out of a plan before that age of 59 and a half, you will be subject to the taxes based on whatever your current income is, and an IRS 10% penalty will apply. So understand that if you are thinking about accessing funds that are really earmarked for a retirement goal. And lastly, we talk about estate planning. When someone passes away without a will, it's called dying without intestacy. And in that case, what happens is the state where that individual passed away, they will have their own specific rules on how the assets that that person owns are distributed to family members or in general to a trust or anything like that. Having a will or a trust in place, doing that proper planning is extremely important. These are your final wishes. And when you memorialize them in a will or in a trust document, they have to be followed. There's all the laws of the land support this 100%. Now, if something happens outside of someone passing away, we have to plan for that incapacity situation. Someone has to go into a nursing home. So there's additional documents that would be necessary, again, to handle that situation, where you would appoint other people to act on your behalf. One simple example of that would be a healthcare proxy, where someone, if you were incapacitated, could make medical decisions for you. Then we also have what are called living wills, which is really more like final directives. Don't use heroic means to resuscitate me. Sometimes people refer to it as a DNR, things along those lines, but it gives general guidance of what your last wishes are. And most importantly, after that is a power of attorney. Giving someone the ability to act on your behalf for financial matters through a power of attorney is extremely important. I've had many relatives that I've acted in this capacity for over the years, and as they've gotten older, helping them through this process of, managing their healthcare needs and also their finances. Without the power of attorney, you can't do any of that. So that and the living will and healthcare proxy are extremely important. And it's generally a package. So if someone typically gets a will or has a trust provision in a will or a separate trust, the attorney will typically recommend that they also get the healthcare proxy, the living will, and the power of attorney. Now, let's talk quickly about when someone does pass away and its intestacy. Intestacy laws vary state to state. So, we typically see a pattern divided between a surviving spouse and the children of the person that passed away. So in this example, just to show you what that would look like for a family of four, the husband passed away, the wife would get half of the assets, and then a quarter of the assets would go to each of the children. Again, there was no specific will in place here to give final directives of where these assets would be distributed. Normally we would say that any of the assets that the husband had would automatically transfer to the spouse, but that's not always the case. It's important also to understand that by simply titling assets a certain way, you can avoid needing a will to guide anyone on how assets are transferred. So for example, if you own a house and you're married, you should have the house titled as joint tenant with rights of survivorship, or a savings account titled the same way between the husband and wife. So if something like that did happen, the asset would transfer automatically without a will or anything like that. It would transfer over to the surviving spouse. You can have TOD designations put on accounts if you want specific dollars to go immediately to a child or to some other person. So understand, there are ways of avoiding intestacy rules by just simply titling an asset correctly, or more importantly, if you have qualified plans like a 401k or an IRA, making sure that the beneficiaries are updated should anything change within your life. Another child being born, you get a divorce, whatever it may be, it's extremely important. We had a situation in the last year where an individual passed away after a divorce 5 or 6 years earlier, and we were always asking, please provide us with your updated beneficiary information, and they never got around to it. They didn't have any children. That individual passed away during COVID, sadly, young person, 58 years old. The brothers and sisters of this individual, who he did not have any relationship with, and it was actually on poor terms, swooped in and inherited all the money because there were no other children or a spouse involved in this situation. So the money that this individual had worked and accumulated all throughout their life basically went to individuals they did not want them to get. So again, just simple planning without a will could avoid those steps by either creating, again, titles on accounts to share assets with individuals should they pass away, or simply go to an attorney or go online and get a will. They're not expensive. If it's a simple situation, you could probably get away for about $400 or $500 for a will package that will be honored in just about any state that you would reside in. So again, understanding those items and again, how intestacy works is very important. And whatever your actual wishes are irrelevant. The laws will dictate how that money is distributed. So again, having a will or specific beneficiary designations on accounts, or just simply titling an account joint tenant with rights of survivorship, will avoid a lot of these issues. Now, when we talk about planning with a will, again, as I said, it's the cornerstone of any estate plan. You want to really have directions on how your assets will be distributed. Now, within a will, it names generally an executor and also a guardian if you have minor children. So understand the role that these people will play. An executor basically oversees the disposition of the assets after a person passes away. If it's a husband and wife situation, they would typically be the reciprocal executor on each other's will. And then if both of them had passed away and there were young children left over, from the marriage, we would want a guardian name to take care of those children. One additional consideration, if there are assets that are being held for the children, you likely within your will would have a trust provision to hold those assets until the children reach majority ages. It could be, age 18, 21. We typically recommend that this trust holds the assets until the child is age 35. I typically recommend a third of the money be distributed to the child as the principal at age 25, a third at 30, and the remaining portion at age 35. Again, you're not here. The child is young right now. You have a guardian taking care of them. You will be needing to name a trustee for this trust. I typically recommend that you do not have the guardian be the same person as the trustee. Again, just having some check and balance between those two items is extremely important. And then again, when you look at how this comes together, it really focuses on accomplishing your main goals. It could be just simply minimizing estate taxes or fees. But again, having a will in place is extremely important. It must be in writing. It must be signed by you and witnessed. So if you do go to an online document, realize you print that out. You typically would go to a notary and do your signature, and then the notary would notarize your signature for it to be valid. And you should have multiple copies of that distributed to the people that would be handling your assets in your estate. Now, incapacity planning, again, this is an illness or injury that strikes anyone at any time. And, it doesn't have to be someone that's older. I had a situation where I knew someone in their late 50s that got hit with a stroke. Totally unforeseen, but again, it was a situation that affected them. But again, not having the proper disability or long-term care insurance in place and not having a plan where someone can maintain these assets, the courts would typically jump in and have to appoint a guardian. We usually look for a family member, but if there are none that are willing to take on this role, the court will appoint a guardian. So a lack of planning puts a burden on this situation. So if there was no planning for long-term care or a living will or a healthcare proxy and also a power of attorney, again, this creates issues for the person trying to help that person. And typically it's a family member. So just doing this little bit of planning at the front end, understanding that if this situation ever happened to you, you have a plan in place and they'll be able to step in and take care of things that need to be done. And again, if the courts have to hire a third-party guardian, again, you're out of the decision loop in this situation, and they are making the decisions on what goes on and what's the best situation for you. So I hope this has been useful for you and giving you some basic highlights of what goes into a financial plan. It may sound like a lot, but once you start to get into the process, it does become relatively straightforward. And I do appreciate all of your time in joining me tonight. And again, I look forward to seeing you next month. All the best, and God bless, and hope everything goes well in your life. Take care.